Hello everyone, this is update for November 6, 2022, day 256 of the war, end of the date update. So as always, I'm going to start with a general strategic questions or topics, items, and then we're going to discuss situation on the battlefield. As a heads up, general situation on battlefield is stalemate for both sides. There's generally called balance of power at this point, given that Russia is actively sending these conscripts to the front line, and so it allows it to sustain its position. Uh, there are there are some indirect indication that Russia might be evacuating this Kherson bridgehead, but it's all very speculative. There is even some information that Russian troops are entered the radio silence regime, and um, but again, it's all super speculative. So I don't want to just want to share it, but may or may not happen. Remains to be seen. Now let's actually go back to the strategic items topics. We're gonna start with the first one. You probably have heard on the news yesterday, or even day I think before yesterday, that there is so-called leak in I think Washington Post where it says that Biden administration is asking Ukraine to be open to negotiations with Russia. This is obviously not like called so-called leak because there is no leaks, right? This is how information is being disseminated by the intelligence agencies. So what they do, they just give information to a journalist who essentially works, sort of sits on two you know, on two chairs, right? Works as a journalist and works for the intelligence agency, and then there's basically they gave him information, he disseminates it, and it's called leaks, but it's not really leaks. It's just how the information is being disseminated. This is being done mostly for internal U.S. political reasons, because there is significant pressure internally in the U.S. where looks like Republicans are gonna at least win lower chamber of the U.S. Parliament, and there is high probability of the winning majority in the upper chamber, right? So then it's going to be a big stalemate inside of the country, uh, and so there is a lot of how to say backfire against supporting Ukraine among the Republican sort of support base, because it's presented as if this is the source of the problems, or it associated with the opposite side, democratic administration that does it and sort of draws us into the war with Ukraine, which obviously far from was into the war with Russia. Sorry, I apologize. Which obviously absolute political manipulation, but people believe it. They see the problems and they just want to change, right? That's just how it works. And it's being played by the Republican side, generally speaking. So that's the situation in U.S. In Ukraine, at the same time, Ukraine is pretty firm, or Ukrainian leadership, where I would say first time I would not criticize them, but actually say that they're making right moves. They just standing firm, no negotiations with Russia until they withdraw from Ukrainian territories. Then, related to this, also Ukrainian leadership decided not to go to G20 meeting, where there was expectation that there will be negotiation with the Russian president. And the reason Ukraine does not want to go there is because there will be sort of undue pressure on Ukraine to sort of to give concessions to Russia for no reason. So basically, Ukraine sees that situation as some countries such as India, China, Brazil trying to resolve their own problems at Ukraine's expense, and for Ukraine it's not acceptable. So for that reason, Ukraine is not, at least that's so far where it stands. Ukraine is not planning to go to this G20 meeting. Um, Now let's actually switch a little bit more to China, and I'll be talking quite a bit about China probably going forward because, uh, as being said, I think by U.S. Admiral Charles Richard, you know, the war in Ukraine was just warm up, appetizer. The real war is going to come when there will be war with China, or we'll see how it will actually. That's actually not foregone conclusion. Maybe China invades Taiwan and U.S. just stays out, and that's going to be a different scenario. And there is possibility of that, and it's not actually small possibility, given that Republican side is taking over legislative branch, which is the most important driver of everything, right? Who can declare or war, or or cannot, or basically who decides about entering into the war. Um, so that would really change the situation in the world, and actually U.S. Sort of position in that world, and that may lead to actually de facto loss of their U.S. its world leader status, and the bigger sort of consequence of that is what's going to happen to the U.S. dollar. At that point, it may actually really crumble, and what will happen as a result of that, that the standard of living in the US probably will drop at minimum by 2 times, and possibly 3 times. And if things really go a bad way, it will turn into Brazil, basically, just another Brazil. So that's just the possibilities or the paths, where this. So in other words, there are two very kind of like essentially bad passes, um, for the U.S. One is, okay, stand uh, against the China and try to maintain its status quo and the world order as we all know it, uh, or sort of fold and lose the leadership status. So that's the sort of two options, and none of them are great options. And you know this U.S. admiral is just explaining, trying, and he's also like talking about that U.S. is barely, essentially unprepared for that war, that it will require all of the resources and everything, kind of like all hands on deck. Um, in some ways, how the Germany was in World War II to survive, essentially, for U.S. and the West at large, right? Because it's not just U.S. So essentially, what we're seeing is there are bilateral agreements being built between some countries in the West, because West is also fragmented in some way. Because you remember I spoke about the German chancellor who went to China, and there is rift with even France within on continental Europe, and however, some countries they realizing that NATO is just too bureaucratic, too like just kind of like big umbrella that really too fat to be successful. Let's put this way, or too bureaucratic to be successful, or to be able to stand off successfully to the threats. So what they doing bilateral agreement, and I'm talking about UK and Japan. So they signed bilateral agreement, about military cooperation, where it allows both armies, both militaries, to be on the soil of either country without any special permissions. Just British soldiers easily fly to Japan, or vice versa, whatever. Then they also agreed to enter into joint venture to build um, military fighters, which is going to be very important because for those who probably have seen it, China has now equivalent of F-35. It's called J-20. Don't know all of the technical specs there. May not be perfect, maybe a little bit worse, but China can have large number. Let's put it this way, and that's just typical approach of Russia. China is quantity, not quality, right? Like, if we even look like Korean War, right, was all about quantity. There was definitely not quality there, but they were still, almost successful. Let's put it this way. So okay, going back to UK and Japan, so they're building this bilateral agreement, and the same is happening also between Japan and Australia, right? The same kind of agreements and all that stuff. So you can see there are like almost like two tiers, kind of like happening in the West. One is sort of US, UK, Japan, Australia that are more sort of really, how to say, cognizant of the threat and what's coming. And then there is part that's sort of other sort of extreme where it's like totally delusional, which is in Germany is the one, and then it's still unclear what the France's plans, and Spain's, like the rest of the continental Europe is still unclear where they all go. And then it looks like Canada is super quiet on all of this, which is very interesting, because actually I wasn't expecting that Canada will be such a try to stay away from all of this basically. So that's what's going on there. Then continuing this Chinese topic, there was incursion of the Chinese aircraft, specifically 46 aircraft. Chinese aircraft entered Taiwanese airspace. So we see kind of repetition what's been going on a year ago. So they kind of like sort of, I would say, training Taiwanese, every government, military, population, that like, okay, that's gonna be a norm. So we're gonna go there because it's ours. um, and then another one is about China is Chinese ambassador in Switzerland, openly, not diplomatically, right? Even though he is ambassador, supposed to be diplomatic, very straightforward, very like direct message to Swiss government saying, okay, don't follow EU lead, don't enact any sanctions against China, and if you want to continue relationship with China. So essentially, they just try that. It's in a way kind of sign of desperation on the Chinese government, where they just trying to threat or job on everyone and see if it sticks. Basically, if the people cave in and scared enough. Um, so again, this doesn't happen. That the first that such a non-diplomatic language is this doesn't happen in normal circumstances. Both sides, it's what this really means is sides are heading toward the war, and they're just doing sort of the final kind of like announcements, final sort of persuasion attempts before it's too late at that point. And for China, China understands that Switzerland will never be sort of supporting China, but at least if it's neutral, that's good enough. As I said before, um, all China cares is that countries are staying out and neutral, and that's already a huge achievement for China. Then what else is about China? I think that's it in terms of strategic situation, and now it's actually a switch um, to Ukraine, to situation in Ukraine. In terms of the energy infrastructure situation is on the edge. Probably one more Russian attack and the country is going to be done. There were some rumors, like not rumors, but I guess rumors or kind of like a clickbait information from the Western media that Kiev is being prepared for evacuation and so on. That's not the case. It just they really don't understand Ukraine. Let's put it this way. Even when they put this news, what's first of all, Ukraine government is so unprofessional and inept, so it will not be able to evacuate people like 3 million. Well, it probably not 3 million at this point in Kiev. Probably 1.8 million population left, maybe even 1.5. So that would be just everybody for themselves, and it's just going to be just panic escape. So Ukraine government is not even capable of doing anything organized like that. So uh, again, if this happens, it happens, and it will be just literally people will be fleeing and surviving on their own, and the Ukrainian government will be as useless as it only possible. Um, so, but the situation is real that there is not enough electricity, and one more attack or successful attack by Russian side, and Ukrainian energy distribution system will disintegrate into islands, as I said before, and that essentially means that not just it'll be islands, but it'll be Black Sea and small islands in that Black Sea. That's how it's going to be, not just you know big islands there. But however, there were no active Russian attacks so far. Unclear if they just preparing for the final blow, or the plans are different. Totally unclear about the situation right now. Now let's actually switch to the battlefield, and let's do in our typical clockwise fashion, starting from the north. So the situation along the state border is fairly stable, and I wouldn't say quiet, but very low level of activity. That's probably the best way to describe it. Now let's jump to the North Luhansk front line. Things here are almost kind of like the same mutual exchange of the blows with no success by either side. So as you can see, Russian side is trying to eliminate this Ukrainian bridgeheads on the eastern side of this tiny river, and Ukrainian troops are trying to get to Svatove and here towards Kremina. So now, as I said, there is a balance of power, so Ukrainian troops will not be able to achieve much unless, as I said, they become more efficient, which is, I'm not seeing that that's happening. So then the status quo probably will remain until later, when Russian troops may actually launch offensive, as I said, sometimes in January, once they train all of those conscripts. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on the North Donbass front line. Things here are also very sort of typical. Wagner mercenaries continuing their attacks. So far, they are not successful. This is the sort of more southern section of this North Donbass. Again, as you can see, all typical places. Soledar, where this is totally like dead end, and Yakovlivka, where the Russian troops do have some minor advances, is like this area south of Bakhmut and a little bit sort of in Bakhmut itself. Otherwise, it's fairly stable here. Now let's look what's going on the central Donbass front line. So again, all the same picture, right? Attacks out of this salient here, Novobakhmutivka, attack out of this Peski, which so far go to nowhere. Attacks in Marinka, again nowhere. Attack in Pavlivka, which now is becoming famous, that also goes to nowhere, and has causes extremely high losses on the Russian side. So specifically, and this is probably a little bit like not perfectly correct. So the attack is being conducted by 155th and 40th, right? So I'll sort of put them more correctly. So the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade reported pretty heavy losses. 300 soldiers dead, missing, and wounded, and 50% of the equipment in just 4 days of the fighting. Just for the reference, so you understand sort of how many people in this unit or the structure of the unit. So this unit has 2 battalions, and you can just roughly crudely say it's 600, or sometimes it's as low as 500 people. Let's just say 600. So it's 1,200 people. Then they also have reconnaissance battalion, which they tend to be smaller, but let's say it's 600, another 600. So it's 1,800, and they also have a tank battalion. So you can just say half of the tanks are gone at this point, and out of the 1800 of actually troops that actually attack, because there is more sort of support, all of that supply stuff, which is almost like a half of the unit, but they not sort of on the ground, they're not really attacking. So because this 300 refers to this attacking to the spearhead of the unit. So out of the 1800, you have 300 gone, so it's 1500. This is um, let's say about like 18% plus minus, maybe a little bit less, of the size of the unit. So you down to 82% on the on in terms of soldiers, and half of the equipment is gone. So at this point, this unit is essentially not capable of continuing offensive operation, or it can, but the probability of success is approaching zero. And similar situation in this 40th Naval Infantry Brigade. So again, this was kind of like a World War One type of situation where there is attack, tons of losses, and nothing to show for those. Uh, so that's update here. At the same time, there are reports of new reinforcements being brought by the Russian side to this area. So remains to be seen. Maybe there is some kind of determination on the Russian side to achieve something here, but it's going to be extremely hard. Now let's quickly check the Zaporizhya front line. First time in a while there was some like minor attack here, which is, as you can see, where the 65th brigade is. It does look like this was just one off, nothing really major going on here, at least based on information I have. Now let's switch to the Kherson bridgehead. Things here in terms of the battlefield are the same. No major attacks by either side. Just reconnaissance, troops action, and artillery. And Ukraine continues attacks against Russian supplies. So again, this is where I was talking that there is a lot of indirect indicators that Russian troops are preparing, if not to leave, that they seriously considering that this is going to be lost by Russian troops sometime. I don't know, months to at some point, because they blowing up the wireless towers. All sort of things are happening. Just telling that they really preparing for potential loss of this. And then there is also this radio silence that they regime that they entered. So looks very unusual, let's put this way, but it's at the same time it's extremely speculative. So but in the long run this is going to happen one way or another. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.